Good evening, welcome to Bourne Environmental Review. My name is Phil Goddard. It's June 8th, 2015, my first show of the year. And those of you that watch me over the years know that I've had shows a couple times a year, not quite as many as I've had in the past. I hope to have at least 2 this year, maybe 3 or 4. We'll see how it goes. And I'm very happy to be part of Bourne Community TV all these many years now in its various forms. And I encourage you to support this local community television station. It's phenomenal, and the courses here are great, and I encourage producers out there to want to get on TV. You'll be absolutely blown away with the equipment and the capabilities of this studio here. So I encourage any of you out there who are interested to join this effort and get involved. My guest tonight is a guest I had on the show a few years back. Laura Kelley is from down in Northeast Ham area. And Laura has quite a background in organics and landscaping, and I'll let her explain her background more. And we've got several issues we're going to talk about tonight, kind of a large perspective about issues on Cape Cod and what's affecting our groundwater, what's affecting our food supply, what goes into our bodies, and maybe a couple of minutes on larger issues that may be affecting the Cape today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Laura Kelley. Thank you for coming all the way up from East Ham.
Thanks for having me.
That's
Glad
excellent.
to be here.
And it's great to have you here as well. And as I mentioned, you have quite a diverse background or a comprehensive background. There's a lot of acronyms after your name. So I'll let you explain the multiplicity of your roles and some of what the acronyms you had, LMT, HHC, and NOFA. So if you could kind of walk us through some of that.
Sure. NOFA is the Northeastern Organic Farmers Association, which I'm accredited for. You go back year after year to keep your credits, and that is organic farming. It's one of the highest standards of education in New England. So I'm lucky to be part of that for, close to 10 years now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's neat to go off of the Cape and learn what's going on, nationally and internationally, learn the skills and bring it back here and introduce it to our soils. So that's what NOFA is all about.
That's the way we used to farm for thousands of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other ones were LMT and HHC?
So LMT, I'm a licensed massage therapist.
Okay.
That seems like a lifetime ago, but I know the human body and the way it works and the parts, and that's what gets me to be such a foodie. I'm all about edible foods, growing it and instilling it in our bodies, and realizing that being non-toxic is the way to go.
All
and
connected,
so,
right?
Yeah, it's all connected. So, going through Anatomy and Physiology 101 when I was 22 years old or something like that gets me, at this day and age now to see how it's such a mandatory way to live is to think about how things connect, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yep, and then HHC.
Holistic health counselor. That
Excellent.
would be the education I received in New York City, being a nutritionist. So I'm able to now educate other people what they can do to help themselves.
You can talk about how we grow good food, how it affects the body, and how to take care of your body in all different ways.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And so you're a business owner too.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Littlefield Landscapes is again, a non-toxic way to grow on the Cape. So I introduce lots of natives, and it's a design company. So I really like to work with timeless situations, bringing in stone, working with things that are going to last a long time, even through generations if they're taken care of properly. So I do, tree work, of course. Ponds are really fun with the fish because fish then give off nitrogen, which then feeds the plants, so they're part of the circle of the life on a farm, as we will. And it's just fun to bring in different elements, so fire pits,
right.
Wood, metal, water, and have it all in somebody's yard. So
Excellent.
That's what I'm offering the Cape.
And then one of the main organizations you're involved in that you founded that we're going to get into shortly here is POCCA.
Right.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Correct, yeah.
So tell us what that stands for.
So I am trying to, how do I want to say this, educate and show that learning can be fun. So POCCA stands for Protect Our Cape Cod Aquifer. And I say it's time to connect the dots, the polka dots. So I'm trying to make it fun, right? Yeah,
That's very clever.
Because we all live here, we all live above an aquifer, and we need to be responsible for our actions above an aquifer.
Absolutely, and those of you that have watched this show over the years, my audience members, I've had many shows on these issues and how it's connected to groundwater, especially with, I'm a volunteer in the military base cleanup, the Superfund site, and all that's gone on out there, and what happened in the 40s, 50s, and the ammunition and all the various activities and what they're doing to clean it up. So I think Bourne really in Falmouth, Upper Cape, because our aquifer is right there and all the water districts are right over that. Not that down the Cape isn't the same, but we're hyper aware because of the Superfund site. So this is excellent information. And so let's get right into it because we got a busy hour jam-packed full of information. We're going to talk a little bit about herbicides. You're also an apiarist or a beekeeper.
That's right.
Okay, and then GMOs, and we'll save, we'll whet people's appetites if they don't know what GMOs, what that stands for.
Okay.
At Bourne Town Meeting, we had a article that talked about a desire to ban spraying of herbicides in the right of way under Eversource's lines at the Bourne meeting, and Bourne Town Meeting supported that. And at that town meeting, we had some residents who abutted the right-of-way on the other side of the bridge in Bournedale, of Native American origin, I believe, that are getting food nearby the right-of-way. So they're really concerned about the spraying and what's going on. So walk us through what the issue is and what it is that we're concerned about here.
Basically, NSTAR, now called Eversource, is our local utility company, and they are planning to spray herbicides along power lines, rights of ways, throughout Cape Cod in order to maintain vegetation. What does that mean? That means there's, said native plants that are going to grow and potentially affect our electrical source. So there are many different ways to maintain vegetation underneath the power lines. They are choosing to use herbicides in order to do that. 5 different types of herbicides with a petroleum-based surfactant above an aquifer in a situation where there are other successful methods is insanity to me.
Surfactant is a substance that helps things bind. So it sticks around for a while?
Glue.
Glue, basically.
Well, it's not that it sticks around for a while necessarily. It sticks to the plant in order to then kill the plant. So that's a surfactant. Of course, NSTAR will say that this will only stick around by the plant, et cetera, but if it's windy, there's so many conditions. How do we know that it's not at all?
And we're talking miles and miles.
So in 2013, NSTAR, at that time, NSTAR sprayed 7 Cape Cod towns. In 2014, they sprayed with herbicides along power lines 8 Cape Cod towns. On the YOP, the yearly operational plan this year, 2015, 13 Cape towns.
They have done this already?
No, it is on the YOP.
Okay.
So where we're at right now is that all the information goes to MDAR. The YOP is the yearly operational plan, what NSTAR plans to do. Then there's a comment period. The comment period just ended about 2 weeks ago.
And who is MDAR?
MDAR is the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources.
Okay.
They're in charge of NSTAR and overseeing their operations. Unfortunately, there's been things going on, bad weather conditions, overuse. I'm not going to, get into too much details, but things where they're violating their own written regulations. So we do not want this to happen to the point where sharing education through POCCA, POCCACapeCod.org,
Okay.
Where I've gone to the selectmen to ask the selectmen, do you want this to happen above an aquifer in your town?
I think Bourne selectmen supported that effort.
All 15 Cape Cod towns supported this effort. I want to thank all selectmen on Cape Cod right now for standing up and for protecting your citizens, because we don't want this. We've been stating for years we don't want this. Now our town selectmen don't want this. It is now in MDAR's lap. What is MDAR going to do? They should have told us about a week ago. So the spraying probably will not commence until September.
Do they have to publish comments and then responses to comments? So it's
unfortunately
not that formal of a rulemaking. It's somewhat of an informal.
There are written regulations that they do not even need to respond to the comments, and there's some amazing comments. There's from the Sierra Club, from APCC,
right,
from senators stating they don't want this to happen on this land, to protect it, to go back to mowing. It's really simple.
Right. Right, and Coalition to Save Buzzards Bay, I imagine there's probably
so many.
in there as
OPC,
well.
we got pond coalitions, we've got conservation commissions. There's so many.
And so if you added up the area underneath the power lines, going from Bourne to Provincetown, the acres, it must be thousands of acres.
150 miles.
150 miles.
200 foot wide.
Wow, that's
Add
phenomenal.
that up. Minus the Brewster and Provincetown. Provincetown, because there are no power lines underground. It stops at Truro. And so, give or take.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty substantial.
And that's just our mathematical. I'm sure there's,
right.
Yeah,
you do the ups and downs and the kettle holes and all that. That's pretty amazing. And obviously, what's their motivation other than obviously we know we have to maintain the rights of way so we can all get our power we're addicted to. But the reality is they did this before the use of herbicides. So what is the driving force right now, at least what they're saying, they need to do it this way?
They say it's easier and cheaper. I don't know. For me, what's easier and cheaper in the long run? I think it's very short-sighted of them to maintain and not listening to a community. Right. This is a whole entire community against a utility. That's what's going on here. And to be a good neighbor, it doesn't cost that much more to go back to mowing. I don't know.
The amount of money they're spending on...
Do they really know, though? They haven't sprayed 13 towns before.
Right.
And they say they're going to use less overtime. Well, 7 towns, 8 towns, 13 towns, that's not equaling less overtime. Mm-hmm. They say they're going to target this and target that, but they don't turn their machine off in between. So there's obvious trails killing the ground cover. The part of the YOP is to keep the ground cover alive.
Right.
It really set it back a lot. It might not be dead because it's, alive over here and over there, but they did kill the in between. So eventually it will fulfill its space again. It's just not the way. It's going backwards before.
So if we kill ground cover, that holds less soil potentially. It causes erosion and then runoff into the waterways and all that, and carrying the pollution with it, right?
So one of two things are going to happen in the 10-year plan, in my eyes, being a landscape architect and an organic land care provider, is that potentially, worst case scenario, correct, the ground cover has died, the natives have died, there is no microorganisms, no worms that are able to sustain and live there anymore because it's a chemical spray. Dead soil. So we'd have really, and this is sand anyway, so we live on a big sandbar, so we'd really have to go back to bringing in new soil, bringing in microorganisms in order to get vegetation to grow again. So, that's the worst case scenario. And that's why I'm standing up to say, just go back to mowing. I know it's not perfect because we've got the turtles and the eggs of the birds and this and that, the blueberries and stuff. But you can go around the low bush blueberries. You can go around the cranberries.
The way they had talked about doing that sort of zigzag with application of herbicides would be just, instead of that, they just say, hey, don't mow here, have someone walking out in front. What you just said reminded me of something. I read an article in National Geographic. I get this magazine. I love the magazine. It's got a lot of issues like this in it. And one of them that prompted me to call you was the one on the bees that they just had. But they talked about the Aral Sea in Central Asia, which is completely drained. We're talking one of the largest inland seas in the world. They diverted it in the Soviet Union for cotton growing. And then, of course, all the pesticides and herbicides from cotton growing washed into the sea, but then when they dammed up the rivers and diverted it inland, the sea dried up. And we're talking the size of, I can't remember, Minnesota or something. So now it becomes dried out and desertified, and then it gets windblown into toxic dust. It's blowing all over Central Asia, killing people. So my concern was now if these herbicides, if this over time starts to happen, you get drier areas with the wind like today. Now you basically have nothing holding that soil down. It's going to pick it up and carry it, right?
I call it a dust bowl effect.
Right.
Correct.
Right. It's just I'm wondering how much this is when you have corporations. Sometimes they get entrenched and they end up spending way more on defending a position that ultimately they collapse on if they really want to be good neighbors than they would if they just done what you asked them to do up front, right? I mean, the lawyer fees alone and the time and energy of their staff to combat this. Is this happening around the rest of the state? What about Western Mass? I mean, I'm sure they must care about what's going on out there. Are they fighting it out there too?
Eversource is not maintaining Western Mass. I think another utility is, but as far as Plymouth and other towns and stuff, they're absolutely standing up about this. Save Our Trees is a big effort that they did. When they do herbicidal applications, they do a clear cutting in order to cut down the larger trees. Anything over 12 feet legally cannot be sprayed, so they must clear cut. And then it's the new saplings and new babies that come up within that first year. That's what they're going to target. So that's kind of the big short-term game plan for them on that. So that's why the clear cutting happened, and neighbors could see neighbors when they've never seen them before. I mean, there was so much uproar because you can see, with herbicides, you're not going to be able to see it. Right. The potential damage to our drinking water. We're not going to see this until umpteen,
in food
time.
Too. This is what the Bourne residents were saying, is that they have subsistence farming. Their food is right abutting this. And
Absolutely.
Then how do you really can't put up a magical barrier, right, when the wind's blowing like today. I'm sure they wouldn't do it today because of the wind. They have probably some guidelines. But it just makes me wonder what other areas around New England this has successfully been fought. Have you found any other communities where they were spraying and the community got the utility to stop?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And that's another thing we're really pushing for, because we believe if they do allow this herbicides to not be used on Cape Cod, it might be the beginning of this wave. So of course the pushback is really large around here. And as far as food being grown very close to power lines, we have wells, like the town of Eastham is all reliant on well water.
Right.
We don't have town water yet. And there's horses, there's livestock, along power lines too. And they're really, okay, well, we'll stay away 50 feet. That's like you said, our boundaries, but nature doesn't have these boundaries. What about all the pollinators? I mean, we could go on.
Right.
This is an obvious situation that's ongoing. I've been doing this for over 6 years, kind of heading the brigade, and it's educating. We need to educate more people, get more people involved, because this is happening now. And, things like glyphosate, Roundup is one of the herbicides that could potentially harm the growth of our children. That's what's being stated around the world.
We're going to touch on that one later in the discussion, because we know about that one. That's a really interesting Roundup is quite a story. I did notice on your website that there is a Senate bill related to this with Senator Wolf down Cape, who's senator down here. Up here, it's Senator DiMacedo. So I'd be curious to know if he's a co-sponsor or is sympathetic.
Absolutely.
I would imagine he is.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that bill.
So Senator Dan Wolf, thanks Dan for all your efforts, has been very vocal on this situation, and to a point where he has written a bill at the State House stating towns. So each town would be able to decide what way they want their rights of ways to be maintained. Bruce could choose mowing. Dennis could choose hand pruning. Easton could choose, pulling out, whatever it might be, as long as it's non-toxic terms, of course. And then having Eversource do those different modalities.
Excellent.
So that's the bill. We're really hopeful.
And STAR would say, okay, so if you're forcing me to do that, then it's going to cost more. Are they going to say, can I pass the costs on? And
that's where Dan's got to figure out what
Right.
the state is willing to share.
But I would imagine if you interviewed people at the supermarket and said, okay, here's the deal. Is it worth $5 on your utility bill for an annual surcharge or every triennially when they have to do this or whatever the frequency, to have them do it this way versus this way? Would you be willing to have a called out cost they could pass right through to your utility bill for that purpose? Overwhelmingly, I would imagine they would support that. What do you think?
I think that they always had mowed power lines once every 7 years, and we never saw that on our utility bill.
Right.
I think that they have been spraying herbicides for the past few years, which is a product, actually, 5 plus petroleum-based survivin plus the container. They use this sprayer. It's this wide. It's like a leaf blower. They blow it on.
Wow.
It's not a...
So aerosolizes it. Yeah, wow.
And it's gasoline needed, and they're pouring gasoline on the power lines. They do have a 3-gallon container of the herbicides already mixed, so they're not mixing on the power lines. We talked to them about that years ago, and they said they wouldn't, so that was good. But that is all costs right there. Those equal something. We have not seen any change to our electric bill. I don't think that we should see change in our electric bill. I think the state and the utility should figure out what they're going to do on our land and keeping us healthy.
MDAR is one avenue of approach. The other, I'm just thinking of this because I'm involved in this space a little bit, is Department of Public Utilities. Is there anything at Department of Public Utilities or Department of Energy Resources level that would affect them on that side? Because that's where they're really regulated, is the DPU. Is there any thoughts
So
about
we're
that?
playing around with them as well as DEP, Environmental Protection. And there's so many cutbacks, there's so many, we're already busy, you're going to give us more
And the buyout
work.
with the retirement
That's
packages.
what we're getting. We're
They're-
getting that kind of a feedback as opposed to, oh, gee, you do have a situation, let's discuss it and let's step up about it. And I haven't heard one department say that yet. So I'm working with Senator Markey now and trying to actually change laws on a
Federal level.
federal level.
Oh, that's a lot easier, isn't it? But that's excellent.
So
Well,
there's
this
a couple
is-
irons in the fire,
Yeah.
and I don't know how it's going to turn out. Right now, it is current events. There isn't much we can do because the comment period is over right now. But of course, you could always continue to call the State House, and MDAR is the department to contact, Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, and tell them your concerns. Tell them why you do not want Eversource to spray herbicides on power lines on Cape Cod now or ever, please.
And I think it's S115 is the bill number. If you go to mass.gov, Legis, Legis, it's the legislative branch webpage. You type in the bill number and it comes up, and it's on your website. You have a link to it as well. So
Great.
I do this every once in a while on a bill that I care. I actually call my senator or call my rep, and they really want to hear from you, and they take it very seriously when you call.
Yeah.
I mean, they track it, and they let the reps and the senators know what's when people call. So it does make a difference, I think.
Yes.
So that's excellent. Is Bourne on the list? 13 to 15.
Yes.
I'd say we probably are.
Yes.
Which ones are not?
Brewster and Provincetown.
Okay.
Brewster and Provincetown. And you do matter. Every single person does matter. If you get a petition, sign it. The best things we can do right now is to sign something, either on Facebook or somebody like at the supermarket, like you were saying, or call. Make phone calls, emails. You don't want to talk? Then email. Each one is literally counted. So if we don't reach out and expect change, that's not going to happen. You know, one little bit here, one little bit there, all of a sudden the cumulative effect is going to make a difference. So please do that.
You know, it's a little bit surprising for large corporations these days when they have a very highly aware, active community like the Cape, that they wouldn't be sensitive to that in the sense that we're telling you, please don't. I mean, it's something that, well, let's see if they come around.
We'll just see how it goes. That's
right.
right.
So more information at POCCA, capecod.org for that.
Yep. POCCA, capecod.org.
Are there other topics or initiatives at POCCA that you want to talk about? Or
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm all about educating, as you know, that's what POCCA is up for. Educating for what? To help locally. And so this topic that we've been talking about, NSTAR, to actually shift laws locally would be wonderful. I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion simply because they're not willing to even discuss. So in the meantime, we're thinking of other things that we can do to help protect our drinking water here on the Cape. And one of the things that I really kind of educated boards of health and boards of commission last year, I'm going to say I started the end of the summer, every 2 weeks, plug all 15, there's 15 towns, plug all 15 towns about fertilizer regulations. Why not regulate fertilizer? Why? Because nitrogen and phosphorus is getting in our bays and our estuaries and affecting, you know, those areas. So what can we do? We can lessen the amounts of fertilizer. Okay, how do we do that? So regulation, well, that's vague too. How do we regulate fertilizer? That's kind of where we're at right now. Each town is going to take it in their jurisdiction to figure out what's best for them. Some it's like $50, others it's like, well, we'll take this first year to find out. You know, so it's really neat to kind of see, you know, how each one is going to work.
Cape Cod Commission, aren't they involved in this issue?
This is a Cape Cod Commission, yes. The EEA, Energy Environmental Association, has offered this, and we asked for an extension. We got an extension for another year, and so last year it did close December 31st. But I'll tell you, within the last 6 months, we got 8 Cape Cod towns. Thank you guys so much. I can list them right now. Barnstable, Brewster, Chatham, Eastham, P-Town, Falmouth, Orleans, and Mashpee all went forward and did the right thing.
To create local regulations on
Regulations. Some were actual regulations and some were bylaws. So this is bound statewide on a state level because of the offer. So I'm asking the EEA for an extension in hopes to get the other towns.
What is the offer?
To regulate fertilizer.
Oh, to regulate, okay.
Per town.
Per town.
If not, the state does.
Okay, I see.
And we don't know, again, it's MDAR. Again, we know how MDAR regulates our power lines. How is MDAR going to regulate fertilizer? What are we expecting?
What's interesting about MDAR, I got to imagine, because they're involved in a lot of things, and they obviously work with organic farmers. They also are involved in renewable energy with taking cow manure and making it into a digester with food waste out in Rutland. I'm in that space, so I know a little bit about that project. So that's controlling animal runoff that can be a problem and getting energy out of it. So it seems like there's some progressive things within their organization. I'm wondering, they must get some real feedback from the organic farmers that they oversee, I would imagine.
Well, who's in charge of MDAR?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That boils the question.
Right.
The EPA. How is the EPA regulating our foods these days? Roundup.
Right. Well, why don't we segue into that? That's the second thing we were looking at.
Let me finish that, okay, because
Sure.
to answer your question.
Yeah.
So the EPA regulates MDAR. MDAR is where our hands are tied because the feds allow Roundup, glyphosate, imazapyr, triclofor, you know, and I was like, oh. Well, Garland 4 is one of them that just blows my mind. Garland 4 kills oysters on contact. What does that mean? I mean, like 0.00000, tiniest amount dead. And it's not in our local garden centers. It's not on Cape Cod. You cannot purchase it here, whether you're a farmer, you know, a homeowner, or a a business.
Right.
They're bringing it over our bridges and introducing it to our soils that hasn't been here before. So Garland 4 is on their YOP. So I say, to MDAR, how's this? The feds allow it. Okay, so the EPA, that's where do they do? Okay, so glyphosate's one of them on our food. We know they spray our food with Roundup because Roundup kills all the weeds, right? So now the super weeds are coming up because Roundup isn't able to, Mother Nature's going to prevail. So Roundup's not doing a good enough job. Oh, they said, don't worry. They just allowed last summer, it's something called Enlist Duo. Enlist Duo is a combination of glyphosate with 2,4-D. Oh, don't worry, we'll take care of that. That is your organic source talking to you right there. You brought it up. So EPA is going in the other direction, and the way I see it, protecting us is not happening. Where the DEP, I believe, would be a much better overseer for the operations along our power lines here on Cape Cod. So that is my one and only ask, is for the DEP to see what's going on, because MDAR has been violating their own regulations.
Well, because DEP gets into the soil, water, and air, and groundwater, all of that, so they would have purview. They have standing to get involved in that, I would think. If you have runoff from your farm going into the rivers, that's a DEP issue. MDAR can't really prevent DEP from getting involved in that, I don't think.
And we're not talking about we want to farm our power lines. We're not farming out there. I mean, there are some farmers, but we don't want to farm. We just want to protect our drinking water.
Yeah.
So the two departments, it's just, to me, it's an obvious, common sense, no-brainer situation. But how do you change the responsibility from one department to the other? That's, I say, hey, Dan Wolf, that's your ballgame.
Yeah, that's the sausage making up at the State House there. Well, because you mentioned glyphosate, is it?
Correct.
Right? Which is Roundup, is the active ingredient in Roundup herbicide. This is one of the hotbed issues regarding GMOs. And I got a story to tell about that when we get into this a little bit. So why don't you introduce to us what GMOs stands for, what the acronym means, and then how this affects us individually.
GMOs are genetically modified organisms, and scientists are incredibly able to take two completely different organisms and combine them together. So the first thing was the super tomato. GMOs were allowed in, I'm going to say 1989. And the first thing that came out was the super tomato. And the super tomato is a combination of a tomato with a fish. Why? Because then the tomatoes could last longer, because the fish had, the ability to withstand colds longer. So you can have tomatoes for 6 months now instead of 3 months. They thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So people were getting sick. There was this thing going on where it said GMOs on the label. So in 1992, they said, oh, you don't need to label GMOs. It has been since 1992 that we don't know what we're eating. Right now, there are 12 genetically modified organisms allowed. And I'm going to say they're in the base of most all of our foods. Like 75% of our foods are genetically, there's some sort of genetic. Because
most of us eat processed food at some point in the day, because we're not growing our food locally as much as we did, obviously, our ancestors, or we're all busy, so you go to the store, you get packaged, anything that's packaged has a shelf life, obviously it's highly processed. So that's where they get this from. So soy is involved in this, I would imagine?
Yes.
Wheat, corn, on and on, I would imagine, all these.
We can do this, ready?
Yeah, sure.
Corn, soy, sugar beet, canola, which is oil, cottonseed. We've got summer squash, zucchini, papaya, Let's see, there's a couple more potatoes, but there's so many different varieties of potatoes. There's like 6 different varieties of potatoes now. And the apple is the latest one. Who did I forget? I don't know. But then there's things like aspartame, you know. And so what happens is it's always in something. You know, that's the way I'm looking at it. If it isn't organic, if you don't buy those 12 things organic, you've got to really realize you're literally playing with the genetics of your own body. So how do GMOs happen? How do they take this fish and put it in a tomato?
And we're not talking like our ancestors, they took 2 types of tomato and they crossbred them in a
Hybrids.
Greenhouse, right? That's what we've done for thousands
Sure.
of years, right? That's the same species of organism. Now we're talking completely different genuses, if you will. I mean, fish and tomatoes. I mean, they weren't meant to be together at all, right?
It's manipulated. There's words like that. It's, you know, with a gun they shoot it with, you know, and they actually have to create a tumor in order for it to grow because it barely needs any soil. That's where plants get their nutrition, is soil. And,
Right.
and then you take the corn that is genetically modified, and it looks great. It's bigger than it's ever. This is great. This is awesome. You go and you take a bite, and there's really not much flavor. There's no nutritional value. It makes you feel full. So you're like, hey, no big deal, happy day. You take the little seed from this corn, you plant it. It's dead. It will not grow.
Really?
Nothing that's genetically modified will grow. It's called dead food. As a nutritionist, you're eating dead food. So what do you think we're going to happen? We're going to get, what are GMOs? What does glyphosate? What does glyphosate give us? It gives us leaky gut syndrome. Well, what's that mean?
Oh, doesn't sound very good.
It widens our ability to break down food, and that gives us things like allergies and, you know, it turns into this whole array of different problems. So you can't say GMOs gives everybody this one thing because each body is totally different.
The dead food thing really is fascinating. So the idea that
Sad.
part of this is production increases is part of what I've heard is the rationale that we got to feed a growing world. We're going to have 9 billion people in 2050. We got 7 billion now. We're exponentially growing. How do you feed a world? Well, you industrialize farming to the point where now we're more productive per acre, and that's where you get the pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, all on and on and on, now GMOs. But you're telling me they're dead. So how do they get the next year's crop? They create another round of genetically modified seeds in the lab?
Farmers have to go and purchase. It's all about money. You've got to go back to Monsanto and buy the seeds.
And that's another whole, forget the health issue. This is one of the most pernicious things that my little bit of understanding of this issue, if you talk about it a little bit, is they have been buying seed companies.
That's right.
And controlling, and they've the seeds that where you buy, and then basically shrinking the available options, and then patenting what you have for crops. And if you grow their crop on your land without their permission, they have the patent police come knock on your door. So maybe you could talk about some of those issues.
Yeah, that's all true.
Yeah.
So those that own the seeds own the world. That's where they're headed. And we've got to save our own seeds, heirlooms specifically, you know, like really the old ones. They're cross-pollinating going on. So they'll have corn crops for miles, and they're monocrops. And, you know, down the street, down the next community, maybe in another town, there's, you know, a non-toxic field, an organic field. The wind blows, it's cross-pollinating, and Monsanto and crew are able to go to now that organic farmer and say, hey, this is on your property, we're going to sue you for it. So there's this huge, unfortunate, it's insane to me, it's complete insanity, but it's a major game plan. It's masterful.
Worldwide.
I'm so impressed by their capabilities to line all this up, and we're just like in shock. We're not able to get ourselves together and figure out a game plan and move forward. There are wonderful organizations that are doing this now. The world is waking up. We are seeing, and this is one of the things I am thankful to Monsanto for. I'm thankful to know that we shouldn't be planting monocrops because we can't keep bees alive. In those situations. I'm thankful that it's bringing the people together and standing up. I'm thankful that we now know that our government is corrupt. You know, there's lots of good things that are coming out of this. This is the way I see it anyway. They're not good. They're not healthy. We are on a spiral down spin going down.
Well, this is kind of, we're putting our eggs in one basket in the sense that if you have monocrops that are then over time get resistant pests, it could wipe it all out because there's not the diversity, right? And you're putting everything into that, and then you got to come up with the next superfood to counter that. One of the things that, with regard to Roundup, this is my story on this. I went to Babson College of Business School, and somehow I managed to pass the science waiver on the first sitting. I remember enough chemistry, so I could take the elective instead of the basic science lab. And the elective I took was commercial biotechnology, and this was 1987. This was way back in the infancy of all this sort of stuff. And one of the things they talked about, among the things were artificial snow and how to lower or raise the temperature, which snow would be, all this wild stuff. Oh, it's great for ski resorts and all this sort of stuff. But one of the things they came up with was a plant that would produce its own pesticide. And the way I understand this works is that Roundup-resistant soy is what's predominantly out in the Midwest in soy in Iowa, where I was a couple of summers ago looking at the fields of soy, where it produces its own pesticide. It's resistant to Roundup. So they go in with, and they just kill everything with Roundup. And the only thing that lives is this crop. Is that
And so
basically how it
how
works?
does that happen? Okay, so back to the genetically modified organism, when they're splicing, I call it injecting,
Yeah, gene splicing, right.
they add glyphosate in the food.
You're eating it.
You can wash all you want, people. It's not coming off. It's inside genetically modified food in order to withstand when they spray the field for the weeds. The gourd says, hey, happy day, no problem.
Part of me already.
I'm inside me, yeah.
And it kills everything except that. And so it's basically denuding the diversity in that multi-layered living organism of a field where we used to grow crops which had all. How does that affect the worms and the microorganisms in the earth as being a horticulturalist and naturalist?
So I kind of visualize it as you're gonna feed the living in a situation like that Twinkies all day, every day for their whole entire lives. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the same thing. Whoa.
Yeah,
What good is that? You're not going to have a strong immune system. You're going to have pests and diseases of your own sorts come in, and it's going to be. You want to feed meat and potatoes. You want to give living things a chance. You want to support them. You want to give them a situation where they can feel vitality, which is what we need to do. You're talking a field. You're talking microorganisms weakening these things that we rely on. Might not be directly in our food source, but they are connected to what is in our food source. Honeybees being a great example of that. They are shipped from one monocrop to another monocrop. They go do the almonds in California, and then the citrus in Florida, and the blueberries in Maine, and the cranberries on Cape Cod, and the apples in New Jersey. I mean, they're on a trip every year.
Wow.
And it's weakening their immune system because they're only eating one crop at a time. And we have this thing called, since 2007, the colony collapse disorder. And bees have dropped in half, I'm going to say just loosely on average, every single winter, worldwide.
That's frightening.
And why is that frightening? Because honeybees are connected to our food. Without honeybees, they say that humans will have 5 years to live because of food source. And the last couple of years, trust me, it's going to be gruel. It's not going to be like you can have everything on your plate.
I think people don't really understand that at all, how reliant we are on bees. I really didn't know that, not many years ago, that Essentially, you've got people that go out with big boxes of bees, and the farmers are like, the bees are here, I can pollinate my... What are you talking about, bees? And how does that work? What exactly are they doing? They're just literally going out to this, what's the stamen it's called, and getting the reproductive...
They're foraging pollen, and they have this beautiful natural way about them. Bees flap their wings in order to fly. Like a stat, I don't know if it's 100 times per second or something amazing, where they create a static effect. So when they go into the flowers grow and must be attractive and attracting to the honeybees. So honeybees go and get the pollen, and it connects. It just sticks to them. Sometimes up to like 100,000 little pollen pieces, and they go to the next flower. And guess what? That's the pollination process from one flower to the next. That's all you need. It's done. They're doing it naturally all day, every day. So we have human pollinators now, because there aren't enough actual native pollinators or bees to keep up with what we need to have our food sources.
And in nature, bees typically had gone to multiple types of plants and species to do this. You're saying now the concern is that if all you're getting is almond pollen and almond nectar, or wherever they're getting their energy, they're just getting worn out. They need a little more.
It's not that they're getting worn out, there aren't enough numbers. Since 2007, we've lost half the amount of population of bees every single winter. So 2008, half, 2009, and this is in general. We lost almost 90% of bees on Cape Cod over last particular winter because we had such a rough winter. We just got 500 more packages that come in. I'm part of the Barnstable County Beekeepers Association, so for anybody that wants to be a backyard beekeeper, please check out bcba.org and join. It's $20 a year, and you learn about how to build your own hives, and it's only a couple $100. You get a package of bees that come in, and you get your suit on, and you can ultimately have your own honey if it's a good year. But it's about pollinating. It's about learning how to keep the bees alive through the seasons that we need to do as humans. And the beekeepers that have thousands of hives that are traveling from state to state, that's one level. They're not doing so well at all. I mean, Google it, their livelihoods are at stake.
Right.
They're losing thousands in a season. They'll go up to Maine and do the blueberries, and somebody sprayed the blueberry fields and they lost all their bees overnight.
Well,
it's crazy.
This is part of what I discovered is what's stressing them. Why is this happening?
So there's so many. I call it the perfect storm.
Right.
There is not one thing. The cell phone towers, there's so many things we can't actually see. And that's one thing I say. We've got to take care of what we cannot see. We can't see this going on, but every single day, what you choose, what kind of shampoo do you use, what kind of toothpaste do you use, where do you get your clothes, those decisions matter. Where you spend your money is gonna matter to honeybees in nature. I mean, those are the things we gotta think about, So it's a perfect storm for them right now. It's in their water, it's in the air, it's in their food source. What's it? A toxic. Everything's toxic.
Pesticides, herbicides.
Do you know that rain is 75%? There's glyphosate in rainwater.
Oh my God.
It's ridiculous.
How persistent in the environment is glyphosate? Does it break down over time?
We don't know. Guess why? We're guinea pigs. We don't know. It's happening.
So it's accumulating. It could get more and more because the trans-evaporative process is just recycling water and over. It goes to the ocean, comes back in the clouds. And so you're saying that's traveling up into the atmosphere. Wow, that is.
It's in breast milk.
Kind of like everybody here and watching this, we all have radioactive outfall in us from all the nuclear testing in the 50s and 60s. Everybody in the world, because it got up in the atmosphere. Is this somewhat related to what's happening with bats? I've got a friend in that arena. And why do we care about bats?
Absolutely. First thing I noticed was in the whales. I'm going to say probably 10 years ago, I realized I love whales. I'm a Cape Codder. I can't help it. They're just big, gentle giants. Oh, I go on whale watches all the time. I just think it's a feeling nothing else will make you feel like that.
Right.
One male whale to 20 females. So what's going on? Frogs, asexual. Bats, dying like by the thousands. There'd be heaps of them outside of bat caves in Vermont. Bees, of course. Butterflies now are the latest, the monarchs. So this is due directly to overuse of chemicals on this planet. These are the canaries in the coal mine telling us what is going on. We can see it, we can say it, we can write it, we can tell each other about it. Hey, we're doing it right now. What are we going to do about it? And is our effects actually going to impact enough in order for them to be here? They're still on this planet, so I see hope. But it's a matter of, I'm going to bring this up again, purchasing. Like, there's this whole world to take care of. How can one person take care of the whole world? You can't. You can only be responsible for your own actions. Right. And if your actions are buying locally grown food from your farmer, I say shake the hand of the person who's feeding you and your family. 3 meals a day. We need a farmer.
And community-supported agriculture, of course, you're familiar with that. There's a farm in Bournedale.
Yep, CSAs and almost
they're
every
all around,
town. And farmers market Saturdays, Wednesdays, Mondays, every other town there's something going on. Bring your own little canvas bag, fill it up. Know what's, that each season you're going to have different things. You can't have blueberries every Saturday. It's things like that. You've got to work with the ebb and flow of what's grown in your community locally, but support them. Your money will then stay in the community, which then allows other generations to stay here too, which is another missing thing on Cape Cod, really.
What's interesting, yes, absolutely. That's another whole show.
So keep your
money
itself here, and that'll help that.
My brother was a farmer in the 70s at Peregrine White Farm in Marshfield, which Peregrine White was the first born on the Mayflower, and the farm that he managed goes back to 1648, and it went out of business in the early 80s. I worked in the farm stand back then, and they called it, what was it, Making It in Massachusetts, something Grow Massachusetts, and he was a generation too early because that effort kind of faded away in the 80s and 90s, and we just went to huge processed food and packaged and all that sort of stuff. That has a whole bunch of other implications in terms of energy use and managing solid waste. That's my arena, recycling. And so now it's coming back around again, and hopefully it's sticking a little bit more this time. That's my hope. You're absolutely right with their choices, though.
Well, I'll tell you, we went through Agent Orange, right?
Right.
Glyphosate is the next chemical warfare from the same company. Monsanto was created in 1899. Aspartame, saccharin, DDT, Agent Orange, GMOs, glyphosate, Roundup, of course, is the common name for that. And this company continues to grow to a point where now they're in charge of our food. So we are now allowing a chemical company to feed us. They're putting the chemical in the seed. They're putting the chemical on top of it when it's grown. Oh, but don't worry, it's still there. Okay, so it's just amazing to me right now.
Speaks to the hubris of humankind.
So for those that say organic's so expensive, though, oh my gosh, where do we go? What do we do? I can't afford this. I really think that health comes first before another pair of shoes and dinner out. And dinner is a tough one. You go to a restaurant, guess what? It's genetically modified foods, most of them. And so we've got, whoever is responsible for shopping at your house is really got a big responsibility. I mean, this is where we're at right now, unfortunately.
So how do they know what to do? I know there's a lot of efforts on labeling. Why don't you highlight that a little bit? Because you were involved in a rally recently, and I'm sure labeling was part of this. And what's going on with that whole idea?
So we really believe liability, accountability, and just being forthright with the label on our foods is, the thing. It's supposed to happen, but it hasn't happened since 1992. So. let's see, a couple different states. So it was the first state was Connecticut, Rhode Island. Vermont is really moving forward to label their foods and stating they're going to do this now. Whole Foods, the chain, is going to do it in 2016. So there's some stores, Chipotle just said they're going to do it. So we have a couple of states, we have a couple of restaurants, we have a couple, supermarkets. They're all, this is the wave. This is the direction.
They fight this tooth and nail. Huge in California. They spend a lot of money, right?
I'll tell you. Yeah, well, of course, because, Monsanto's still going to make the money, right? And Syngenta and DuPont and Dow, they're really all in bed together. And they have this revolving door thing going on at the, government level with the EPA, the USDA, the FDA. They're just flopping back who's the president now and who's president later, and it's amazing what's going on.
What's interesting, there is a difference now. I see that smart companies that pay attention to this actually see this as a marketing tool and are creating products that cater to this and shift people, because they want options, and so they'll buy their products and then sway it over. And I've seen this where previously resistant companies to an issue suddenly want to switch over and be more green, for example, and come up with new products. IBM has got a whole line now on better energy efficiency and smart grid technology to reduce our footprint. And they market that as a attribute of their company, and they're doing really good things in that respect. Whereby before, who cares about the environment? We'll wash all our solvents from the computer making down the drain. So I think there is some evolutionary thinking here, hopefully. I got the 5-minute sign probably about 2 minutes ago. One thing I wanted to, what do you see as one of the major issues affecting Cape Cod? We've talked about a bunch of things here.
Yeah, well, right now the first thing that's most critical is the power plant in Plymouth. The Hillgrim power plant is unsafe, and they're not taking care of it correctly. And that is our biggest threat now to Cape Cod.
Storage of the rods is what bothers me, is that it's dependent on water, which requires power and generators and backup, and they're not doing the dry casket storage fully. And I talked to the Downwinders, as another group, that they did build some, but it was only for temporary storage while they service the other. And they've got hundreds of these in there. It is a really scary prospect to have a Fukushima, which is the same type of plant, on Cape Cod.
They're planning to close the bridges if something happens, so we all need to, stay confined in our houses until somebody comes and finds us. And that's not a safety plan, and that's why we're asking to close the power plant.
And Bourne is trying to get included in the evacuation plan because we're just outside the 10-mile limit. In the minute or so we have left, I wanted to mention your site again. It's POCCACapeCod.org and littlefieldlandscapes.com. And your phone number is 774-353-6511. Laura Kelley. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We've thrown a lot at our audience, but I know you can handle it, folks. Check out the websites for more information and get involved and make better choices for your health and for the community and local business too.
That's right. Your dollar is your vote.
That's right.
Every day.
Thank you very much for watching. Have a great night, everyone. I appreciate it.